The following program contains adult content. Some scenes may include graphic truthfulness, shocking honesty, and revealing insight. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome to Adult Content. My name is Brian Content. It is Wednesday, July 5th, 2006. Welcome to the show. You know, since 9/11, we have been giving up certain freedoms in order to stay safe from terrorism. But just how many freedoms should we give up, and at what point could we go too far? Those are the topics we're going to discuss today during the show. But first, let's check some of the top news stories of the day. The man who was facing dozens of years in prison as the mastermind of the nation's largest ever corporate swindle is dead. Enron Corporation founder Kenneth Lay died today in Aspen, Colorado, where he was summering while awaiting sentencing for his crimes. He was facing dozens of years in prison. Along with his financial officer, Jeffrey Skilling, the two defrauded Enron investors and employees by repeatedly lying about the company's financial strength in the months before it plummeted into bankruptcy in 2001. Lay was 64. His pastor says he died of a heart attack. Japan has announced it is considering strong sanctions against North Korea in a United Nations resolution on the heels of the reclusive communist nation's missile tests yesterday. But China and Russia said they favor a weaker council statement without any threat of sanctions. Those are positions that will make it very difficult for Japan and its key allies, the U.S. and Britain, to get tough measures going. The Discovery shuttle astronauts had a busy day today using highly sensitive cameras attached to a 50-foot boom to carefully examine their craft for signs of damage from yesterday's launch. Nothing serious was reported, but the process is still incomplete. Video of the launch showed a piece of debris from the external fuel tank striking the shuttle on liftoff. The retaliation against Hamas radicals in Gaza has ratcheted up after some sophisticated missiles were fired into the heart of Jerusalem. Reportedly, the Israeli army has now been authorized to enter populated areas of the Gaza Strip to carve out a buffer zone. The offensive began last week after the abduction of an Israeli soldier. Previous raids into this area have sparked running gun battles that have caused serious casualties on both sides. In Somalia, where radical Islamists control things and watching TV is banned, 2 people were shot to death because they refused to stop watching yesterday's World Cup match between Germany and Italy. A local radio station says armed militia opened fire after a crowd of teenagers defied their orders to leave a hall where a businessman was showing the match on satellite TV. And it will be France meeting Italy in the World Cup final as the French team defeated Portugal today by a score of 1-0. The final will be played in Berlin on Sunday. South Florida weather calls for partly cloudy skies tonight with a 40% chance of showers and thunderstorms, lows in the mid-70s to upper 70s on the beaches, and then tomorrow a 60% chance of rain, mainly during the afternoon hours. All right, coming up is our desire to stay safe from terror compromising what keeps us free in the first place. Think about that. We'll be right back with our guest in just a moment. This is Adult Content on WHDT. Hi, and welcome back to Adult Content. My guest is a man who has spent the majority of his adulthood trying to preserve what is written in the U.S. Constitution. Larry Pratt is a noted columnist, author, and executive director of the Gun Owners of America, an organization that is dedicated to preserving our rights under the Second Amendment. And that has a great deal to do with a lot of what's going on in today's world. It's not so much, and actually we'll get back to gun ownership, but we're gonna kind of weave our way there. First of all, I want to say hello to Larry, and thanks for jumping on board with us today, Larry. How are you?
Well, it's very nice for you to have me on. Thank you very much.
You know, I don't want to paint you into a corner because of the organization that you represent, but really, gun ownership has a lot to do with where we end up as we give away some of our freedoms. But what I want to start with is, you know, the whole idea, should Americans sacrifice privacy for security? And since 9/11, we've been doing just that in order to try to stay safe from terrorism. I guess the big question is, you know, how far should we go, and have we already crossed the line?
Well, gun owners have been on the front line of this for quite some time because one of the chief elements of gun control that's been put forth by, whether it's Sarah Brady here in the United States for what used to be called Handgun Control Incorporated, or what is being argued by people at the United Nations, from Kofi Annan, the Secretary General, on down, is registration. And registration is, on its face, a form of violation of privacy. It's considered, well, in this case, the end justifies the means, which is, of course, the argument that's used every time that any privacy is invaded. The fact that gun registration doesn't work, doesn't solve crime, doesn't do anything to reduce crime, that doesn't seem to bother most people who just think that it's a good idea to know who has a gun and keep tabs on those dangerous people. Well, these arguments kind of sound a little familiar to us when it comes to the larger privacy debate. In fact, there were efforts with the national security letters, a kind of a writ of assistance, to subject gun store records, which is where the gun registry at the federal level is maintained, kind of a decentralized one, but it's a registry all the same. And these national security letters would have been something that could have and may well have already been used to grab up gun store records from across the country and put them into a registry, assuming that, well, gee, it never seems to have kept a criminal from getting a gun. In fact, criminals almost never use a gun registered to their name, but somehow, evidently, registering this information will keep a terrorist from getting a gun. And that's the logic that goes on. And then when we look at the other kinds of invasions of our privacy that are taking place, whether it's the electronic surveillance of email or telephone communications, whatever, it's, well, we've got to do this to go get the terrorists. Well, if that were, I'd almost be willing to listen to the argument if they were willing to profile. We haven't had any blacks, we haven't had any Baptists, we haven't had any Italians. It's always been somebody who's a Muslim radical that's done acts of terrorism that everybody is understandably concerned about. But there's no desire to go after the likely suspects. It's as if there were a church cross burning in the South, say, 20 years ago. Now, really, would the police go and look in the black community to find the culprit?
Yeah. Well, it seems like that, and talking about, data mining and databasing, that seems to be the central core of part of what, the Patriot Act is all about, and what we really quite willingly gave up initially after 9/11, which I don't necessarily disagree with the intent of trying to protect us from terrorism, but when you start getting these databases of personal information, at some point there's some compromisation that could go on, and that's when we're all in danger.
It's treating all Americans as if they were suspect, rather than treat the group that is known to be about 99 out of 100 times the suspect group. And so you're developing this enormous database on people who arguably are never going to have anything to do with terrorism. And it almost seems as if either they're really that stupid at the Department of Homeland Security and the federal government, basically, or that they're using this as a golden opportunity to get that kind of control and data on the American people that I'm convinced there are some individuals in the government that just so convinced that they're better than the rest of us that we really need that much watching.
Well, it sounds almost like a paranoid position to take, and yet it's frightfully possible. And just the idea of it, just that information being out there, I mean, we all want to trust our government, but it puts it in a position where it could fall into the wrong hands. And
they don't take good care of data.
As well reported and documented in the last few months, especially.
Precisely, the VA health records of 23 million veterans that was purloined. Well, how did that information get into the position where somebody could steal it, for goodness sakes? But I think the point is they really don't care about the citizenry as long as they are kept protected from public inspection. That seems to be the only thing that they care about. Everything they do is top secret. Everything we do is a piece of glass. And frankly, having experienced this working in the field of the Second Amendment, I can just see that same impulse, because it is more of an attitude rather than just somebody not liking guns. It's we don't trust you. We're in the government, and we shouldn't trust you because we are better than you, and you aren't as good as we. And it's that attitude and it's so stupid in the end, because they spend resources wanding down an 80-year-old woman who can barely get out of a wheelchair, and meanwhile the more likely suspects are not given any more examination than the man on the moon.
Well, we're giving up. I mean, we're trampling on part of our Constitution in order to protect this political correctness, which I don't really see in the Constitution.
That's an awfully good point. I'm going to remember that, because you can't find federal government having been given by we the people power to regulate guns either.
Yes.
In the Constitution. And as you just said, neither is political correctness. But, man, they're acting as if everybody knows it's got to be done. Well, show me.
I'm wondering, and you spend a lot of time in this area, is this a partisan debate? Because I can't tell a Republican from a Democrat on this issue here. You have people who back the administration, predominantly Republican, obviously, and yet, how does this break down politically, this issue?
There, I think, tend to be more Democrats in opposition to wholesale databasing than there are Republicans. And I think it's because the president has wanted it, and people who probably wouldn't have done it had Clinton asked for it don't have any problem acceding to these requests as long as it's our guy, because, hey, it's our guy, and we don't want to embarrass him anyway. So there is some partisanship involved in that, and I think if Clinton had asked for the same kind of authority after a 9/11 type of event while he had been president, the Democrats would have probably acceded to what he wanted, and the Republicans would have been in high dudgeon about how can he do something like this that's so unconstitutional.
And it's funny, you can't tell, a true conservative who you would think would be the staunchest defender of the Constitution, these pundits coming out as this story that, with the New York Times, with reporting on the swift financial tracking of terrorists, the people you would think would be the ones who would be most for the right of the press are the ones who are now saying, that they want to cite, seditious acts and treason against the right of the press. But I mean, that, this is a constitutional protection right here as well.
Well, it's certainly making America, I think, debate some of these issues, and the debate has been clouded by the point you were making, that there seems to be inevitably a partisanship involved in this, and that's a real shame, because these are issues that they're going to get settled, and we're going to accept them as, well, that's just the way it is, and then when they come back to bite us later on, we'll wonder how in the world did that happen?
My guest is Larry Pratt, the Executive Director of Gun Owners of America, and we're going to talk some more about this issue, about giving up our rights and how it all relates to the Second Amendment and really protecting ourselves in the end. We'll be right back. This is Adult Content on WHDT. Hi, and welcome back to Adult Content on WHDT. My guest is Larry Pratt, the Executive Director of the Gun Owners of America organization. You can check out their website, gunowners.org. A lot of interesting reading there, and I think anybody who considers themselves a true American would want to brush up, because when you break it down to brass tacks, the Constitution kind of says it all in a few succinct words. So we all need a refresher course here and I think it's well worth checking out.